This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, we've packed a number of shows together to give you some highlights. I know you're going to enjoy the show. Thank you for being with us today.
Our guest is Dylan Marma. Thanks for being on the show, Dylan.
Thanks for having me, Whitney. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have Dylan on the show. Dylan began his real estate investing career in 2015. He quickly rose to a leadership role in a residential and commercial real estate investment company in San Diego. In early 2018, Dylan joined the team at Rand Partners. That's Jake and Gino, which most of the listeners, I'm sure, have heard of, and that to expand into additional markets throughout the Southeast, as well as to build out the systems to open up the doors for outside investors to partner through syndication. Now, at the age of 25 years old, he owns and operates over 500 units. So it's very impressive, Dylan, and I love having somebody in their mid-20s or younger on the show that's been as successful as you, and just to show that, you know, all these limiting beliefs, it's just, you know, they're just not true, right? That it can be done, and you're making it happen. I know you're playing a big role at Jake and Gino. I know they're thrilled to have you on board, and you know, your all's business, as we were talking about, just growing. Your team's growing. It's amazing what's happening there. Just great guys, and just amazing what just their integrity level and their business quality is just fabulous, and it's showing. And so, Dylan, tell the listeners, you know, a little more about just who you are in case they haven't heard of you, and what your focus is right now, and let's dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sure we can touch a little bit on my story, but today we'll start with, you know, where I am right now, playing a role within Rand Partners. I really play two different roles where, you know, I think any business, as you're in this sort of the startup phase, which I still consider us in somewhat of a startup phase, you know, we're as a business, well, I've been involved in the last 500 units or so. You know, as a business, we're at roughly about 1,500 units, and we actually just hired our first employee. So it's an exciting time period for us. And I play the two main hats I wear. Number one is investor relations. It's working with the investors on the front end, having a lot of the front end phone calls, having a lot of, you know, being involved with some of the webinars, the marketing materials, things like that. You know, the asset management stuff to keep the investors engaged. And then number two is acquisition. So a lot of the front end underwriting, a lot of driving out to the markets, touring the markets, the sub-markets, looking at the deals themselves. And, you know, there's four of us, you know, as a business that have been running and operating over the last year together. And I think we all have different backgrounds, different mindsets, and it's a great collaboration, you know, effort that we have as a team. So I love the environment that we work in. And like I said, you know, we had Mike Taravella as our newest hire start. Actually, his first day was today, and he's coming on board to help us as an associate, of course, because it's kind of an all-encompassing thing, because like I said, we all have to wear a lot of hats starting off. So that's where we are today in business, and overall, you know, again, it's been a great journey so far.
Awesome. And so, you know, I've learned a little bit about Rand, and obviously I've seen your all's growth and keeping up with you all a little bit. And I get your newsletters as well, by the way.
Excellent.
Yeah. So it's good. It's good stuff. I love seeing, you know, just good people doing great things, and just the growth you all have had. So, you know, let's dive into a little bit about what Rand is doing right now with the quote market, end quote, you know, the way it is. And, you know, we hear that all the time. And, you know, just what you all are looking for in deals, maybe how that's changed or how you're looking for it to change going forward.
It's really an exciting time in the market right now, right? Everything with interest rates getting cut further and further, we're seeing a lot of shifts in, you know, asset prices and the way that buyers and sellers are operating. And everyone, I think, is realizing that it's only, you know, the end of this bull run is only so far ahead of us, right? So I think a lot of us are looking at, number one, how to preserve capital, how to protect our downside, and then number two, how to still create an attractive enough opportunity for the investor base and for ourselves, right? So for us, really, our bread and butter has been from day one workforce housing. So a lot of what we look at when we say workforce housing is usually that sweet spot of the 40 to say 60,000 median income range. For the most part, we're typically catering towards residents that work in, say, retail. Maybe they work in restaurants, or, you know, retail employers, or they work in blue collar. You know, they might work in industrial. Really, just your working force, you know, housing that is going to provide just a safe and clean and affordable. I say affordable not in the sense that investors are used to it, but in the sense of just a reasonably priced place to live that's managed well, that provides good quality service. We do all of our management in-house. Jake leads up the Rand property management, so every single asset is self-managed. So we really emphasize that at a high level, is just providing good customer service and making sure that we're on top of it, and really being hands-on with operating each property, really, really effectively. And then typically on the purchase side, we're looking at assets currently. You never want to put yourself in a box completely, but I'd say 9 out of 10 assets that we look at are in the built before 2000s. They are, so you're going in at a heavy discount to replacement cost. You're also going in to an asset that typically is going to be cash flowing from day one. It's usually occupied. It's usually stabilized from an occupancy standpoint. So we're able to go in with agency debt. We prefer long-term fixed rate financing, because I think that does protect your downside from one of the risks, which is your interest risk. Especially right now, it can be really attractive financing rates. So we're definitely trying to take advantage of that. And of course, we're always looking for operational inefficiencies. We're looking for rents that are below market, like everyone else, typically in the value add space. But we're also looking for other income streams, and we've done a good job at being able to produce on many properties as much as 15% or more in some cases of additional income. Just through maximizing different fee structures, things like that.
Our guest is James Wise. Thanks for being on the show, James.
Hey, Whitney, thanks for having me on, brother.
You all are expert in management and taking care of tenants that are, we'll say, slightly unique, right? Or
you don't gotta say slightly unique, Whitney. I mean, some of these people are damn savages. Let's just call it like we see it, man. It's tough. It's a tough industry.
So I'd love to hear, some of those stories, some of the, worst evictions and things like that. And I think, you had a very popular show recently about that, and tell us some of those stories and how you all handled them.
Yeah, man. Look, guys, here's the deal. A lot of people like to dance around the issue of how difficult it is to be a property manager, to actually invest in real estate, because various folks, brokers, right? I'm a broker as well. Brokers want to sell properties. Brokers want to broker deals. Syndicators, they want to sell their sponsorships. And don't get me wrong, I do too, right? I sell 150, I've sold $150 million worth of rental real estate in the last few years here. And I run a large portfolio top to bottom, like I already mentioned in the show. It's one of the reasons I come on shows like this. I want to sell more real estate. I want to do that stuff, but I don't like to dance around the topics. And, we don't have to call some of these people unique, man. Some of these people are freaking savages. And that's where the idea for my show, one of my shows on Holton-Wise TV, this is probably the most popular show. It's called the Tenants from Hell Show. What that is, man, we give you guys real life situations that have happened to us or have happened to other investors. So if anyone out there is listening to us right now and you're interested in being on that show, just shoot me an email. You Google us and I'm sure you'll be able to find us. Let us know your story. We might have you on the show. But like some of the worst of the worst, Whitney, like you touched on the evictions. Like when we evict people, I don't just, I evict probably 100 people a year, right? I run a large portfolio. That's part of the business, guys. If you're investing in real estate, it doesn't matter if you're investing with Grant Cardone, Naroda, Holton-Wise, you're buying stuff off of Roofstock, whatever. Nobody in the world has figured out how to run rental real estate without doing evictions. That's part of the game, y'all. So what I like to do, we like to film our evictions. We do about 100 evictions a year. We film them, and the best ones, we go out, we put that on the show. We do that live. Like one episode, we had a hoarder, right? A lot of people, they don't understand what exactly it's like to go through an eviction or what is actually going to happen. Like a small little apartment, Whitney, it was like, 600 square feet. And it was this thing rented for like probably $600 a month. I can't remember off the top of my head, but we had to get an entire crew in there. I probably had on site in that video. You see all the guys in the video working, emptying out this apartment. I probably had 3 bailiffs and like a total of 9 guys there all day emptying out this little 600 square foot apartment. You think you've seen some rough stuff, guys. This ended up being a total build to get that apartment completely emptied out, renovated, and ready to rent again for $600 a month. The total cost ended up being like $15,000 or $16,000. And that's the part of the business that nobody really ever wants to talk about. But, these things happen when we're doing our analytics on our rental properties. We need to put this type of stuff in our performance because this is stuff that's going to happen. And that's what the Tenants from Hell show is all about, man. That's what we like to do. We want to show people that so nobody goes into investing with a blindfold or blinders on.
How are you all keeping from renting to more people like that? I mean, I know it's going to happen. That many units, it's going to happen. Like you said, 100 evictions a year. It's part of the business, right? But how do you start to minimize that?
Well, there's a few ways, right? Like the standard boilerplate answer to that question that you'll see most people give is, you got to do proper tenant screening, which is absolutely true. And we could talk about tenant screening, but I don't want to talk about that first. What I first want to talk about is the very first thing that screens your tenants, okay? And that is the neighborhood. That is the class of asset, right? Let's not pretend that every little neighborhood in the United States of America is Mayberry, right? That's just not how it works, okay? You have, what I like to call A-class neighborhoods, which is primarily your owner-occupied neighborhoods where your wealthy folks in that major metro live, right? Not a lot of rental property investors are gravitated towards that because the cash flow numbers typically don't pencil out, right? It's just, where the owner occupants live, right? But then you get into like B-class neighborhoods, which is your suburbs, where you start to see a little bit of rentals peppered in there. So it's kind of like 70, 80% owner occupied, but then like 20% rental properties. And then you get into your C-class stuff, which is like a nice mix. It's probably half and half rentals versus owner occupied. And then you get lower into D and F class where you start to see all rentals and, you start to get into rougher, tougher areas, ghettos, hoods, things of that nature, right? So depending on the type of investment you buy, that's going to be the biggest determining factor in the amount of bad tenants you're going to run into, right? Like no matter how nice your property is, if it's smack dab in the middle of the hood, you're not going to get high quality folks to live there. High quality folks just, they're going to choose to go to areas with nicer schools, where the rest of the neighborhood keeps it up nicer, the property values are higher, things of that nature. So when we're running our performas and things of that nature, we need to factor this type of stuff in, and you really got to match the property you're going to buy with your risk tolerance. Because here, the flip side of that coin is, like in a B-class neighborhood, like what we do a lot of like small multifamilies. That's what we do here in Cleveland, and people are blown away by the pricing, right? Like in a C-class neighborhood, a very typical sale of ours would be we will sell an investor a duplex that's going to rent for probably $750 a unit, right? So it's going to be $1,500 a month in a C-class neighborhood, and that is only going to cost that investor probably $85,000. Now, a lot of people are probably like, oh, whoa, they're probably grabbing calculators out right now, running their numbers like, oh, those are really good numbers, right? Now, same thing. You can get, $750 a month in rent out of a duplex in Cleveland in like a D-class neighborhood for even less. You can get that for like $40,000, but now you're in the ghetto, right? And it's going to come with varying levels of difficulty, right? So like with the C-class, property, maybe your average tenancy is 2.5 years. Whereas you go to the D-class, maybe it's less than a year. So you got to factor in those costs. Or if you want super stable tenants, college degreed, dual income, maybe you'll try to get that $1,500 of rent in the B class, but instead of paying $40,000 like in the D or $85,000 in the C, you're willing to pay like $150,000 now, just to maintain that lower risk tolerance. So that right there, that's going to be the first thing. That's how you screen your tenants, right? No property manager in the world, no matter how good they are. Like, I would like to say, Whitney, I'm pretty damn good at being a property manager. This ain't my first rodeo, brother. But no matter how good I am or how good Holton-Wise is, we're not going to be able to put B tenants that are attracted to B-class neighborhoods. We ain't going to be able to put them in your D-class properties, guys. It's just not possible. Those people, have earned the right to live in nicer neighborhoods. Why would they go back? There ain't nothing I can do. You know what I'm saying?
Now, I really appreciate you talking about the neighborhood and how that's part of the screening process long before you ever talk to the tenant. I mean, you've limited the class of tenant that you can get in there, and most people are going to jump right to the screening process. But yeah, you're exactly right. You're not going to bring the person who's used to living in the B class property or better to the C or D or we'll say C minus or D or worse area.
Absolutely. And then once you've established that, right, you figure out what your risk tolerance is. And like, that's another thing the tenants from Hell show like helps investors. Like, you could be a first time investor listening to the show and you're like, I could deal with the rough stuff. Let me handle the tough stuff, man. I want that cash flow. James said I can get $1,500 in rent for $40,000. All right, brother. Pump them brakes. That's cool, man. I have a lot of properties in the ghetto. The ghetto has made me a wealthy guy. But if you're, brand new, I don't want you going into this with blinders, though. So that's why that show is there. So you might be thinking, dude, how bad could it really be? Is it tough? A guy like me, I deal with this every day. We evict 100 people a year. I could deal with it. I can understand it. But, dude, you got to have the right stomach for it, right? So like, that's what the show is for. It really gives like investors a real look at this. Like I told you about the eviction, right? $16,000 turnover costs, but that just doesn't really paint all the stuff that really happens. So before we even get into screening, if I may, I just want to just like talk about a couple other wild stories just briefly. I don't want to bore you guys. If you guys want to see the whole stories, obviously watch the show, but like just stuff we got to deal with. Like at one point, the house that I personally live in, like it's not titled in my own name. At one point, I had a tenant who looked up where I had actually lived with my wife. We didn't have any kids at that time, thank God, but he had looked up where I lived and threatened my maintenance team members every time they were over at his apartment building that he would threaten them, tell them where, he would read off my address to them, telling them that he would be coming to my house one day and setting it on fire. So, I had to take the precaution of, moving from that home and actually titling the home I currently live in a completely different name to remain semi-anonymous to avoid shit like that, right? If you have a lot of properties in just rough neighborhoods, well, who do you think lives in rough neighborhoods, guys? Rough people, dangerous people, right? So, there was that. That's a messed up story. A lot of people wouldn't think stuff like that happens. We had one woman. Man, it was around Thanksgiving one year, Whitney, and it was storming like crazy. The day she kept calling the office, we had voicemail after voicemail. This poor woman she lived on the second floor of an apartment building of ours, and she's just calling in the middle of this rainstorm, upset because water's coming into her dining room because a couch got thrown through her dining room window. Now, I don't know if you caught that, brother, but she lives on the second floor, okay? So this poor woman lives on the second floor of this apartment building. Turns out the freaking yahoos that live a floor above her found out that they had bed bugs, which is another thing that is super common when you get into the low-income stuff. And if you guys want to see some wild bed bug stories, you bet your asses I got those on the show with actual footage, some freaking dime-sized bed bugs, y'all. But anyway, so this poor woman, she's got water coming into her dining room from the window that's got a couch through it on the second floor because these folks above her, they found they had bed bugs on their couch. And of course, to them, right, in their drunken stupor, they said, oh, we got bed bugs. Of course, naturally, the solution is to right now in the middle of the night, in the middle of this rainstorm, open our third floor window and just chuck the couch out the window, right? That made sense to them. Just other stuff, man. Like I own a really large building, right? Huge building. It's like 40,000 square feet, okay? And it's nicknamed the Sex Motel, okay? And the reason it's nicknamed the Sex Motel is because it's in a C-class neighborhood, but it's probably by far an F-class asset. And this thing sat for probably 25 years in a C-class neighborhood of Cleveland. It was probably the sore spot of the neighborhood. Like the rest of the neighborhood's pretty decent, right? But I would say this was the building that was bringing the neighborhood down, okay? And the owner of said property, he just ran it as a motel, okay? And it's not nice, right? It's not like it's not a Days Inn or Ritz-Carlton or even it's not even really like a Motel 6, right? Lower quality. Essentially, the guy was renting rooms by the hour for about 20 years, right? So prostitutes, drug addicts, that's the only type of people, just transient, rough, tough, nasty, gross people. Those are the only type of people that would patronize this motel. And a huge motel, though, dude, like 38,000 square feet. So I'm a broker. Guy hires me to sell the building. I can't sell this building, man. I tried for a year and a half, and I'm a damn good broker, man. I'm the number one seller of rental property in the Cleveland market. I'm good at what I do. I couldn't sell this thing. We would get people in there, and they would try to buy it, and then they would just back out last minute. The building was old. It was rough. It was tough. Couldn't really finance it because this guy's doing cash business, renting rooms by the hour. You go there, and there's actual prostitutes, like, wandering around. Looks like zombies from The Walking Dead, man. Drug addicts. It's rough, dude. It's nasty. It's called the Sex Motel, right? So I couldn't sell this thing, man. So I'm like, screw this. I got to do something here. I'm like vested in this project. It's in this neighborhood. I owned a large apartment building across the street, actually. So I'm like, blah, 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 blah. I decided we dropped the listing. I buy the property from the guy. I remove the entire motel business from this thing, like no motel. Get rid of that. In the process of redeveloping this thing, turning it into apartments, right? We had in the motel, there was like, I think 38 motel rooms, but there was also 10 apartments where he had people living, okay? So we didn't kick all of them out. We wanted to keep some folks still in there. We got rid of the motel business, got rid of the prostitutes, all that type of jazz. You need to keep some type of, bodies in there, right? Because you can't just leave these buildings empty, guys. People will break in and you'll have to evict them and they'll strip the building down. You can't just leave it totally empty, right? So you need bodies. Even if they're not the best bodies, sometimes bodies will help protect your asset. Like, it's a different ballgame, man. It's a different ballgame when you're in these rough neighborhoods. But anywho, to try to put a bow on this, long story short, a couple of the bodies that were in the building got into an argument with each other. I believe there was a monetary dispute. I believe it was for a sum somewhere in the ballpark of $20. And one guy was slighted by the other guy. So The other guy decided, as a means to get even with him for the $20 being stolen from him, he was going to set his car on fire. The only thing he knew about the other guy's car, though, was that it was a gold car. Problem was there was actually 2 gold cars in the parking lot. Apparently 2 of our tenants had gold cars. So what do you think happened to both those cars? Whitney's, boom, both cars up in smoke. So, this is just the type of shit that you see, right? Cars getting set on fire. That's the type of stuff that happens. So it's not as simple and clean as people pay rent, they don't pay rent, you evict them, you pay a little bit of money, and you move on, right? These are real people. They have real lives, real stories. And, not all of them are going to run the straight and narrow. So that is why I like to do the Tenants from Hell show. That's why I like to present this. That's why I come out. I'm rough. I'm uncensored, right? I'm not PG, right? It's a rated R business. I'm a rated R dude. I want to present to you guys exactly what's happening. And if you guys can watch that stuff and after that, you're like, hell yeah, man, I'm still all systems a go, then let's get you into those D-class assets because you're going to roll with us when those things are going to happen. But if after those stories, you're like, whoa, I want nothing to do with that. That sounds terrible. That there's easier ways to make money. Now it makes sense why folks are paying $150,000 for a relatively similar amount of rent to avoid dealing with individuals like that. Because you ain't setting cars on fire in a B-class neighborhood. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you for being with us again today. I hope you have liked and subscribed to the show. Please tell your friends about the Real Estate Syndication Show, and I hope that you are learning and growing. Don't forget to go to lifebridgecapital.com where you can start investing today.